Hello. Today I'm going to make a little bit more of an impromptu video that's not going to be as structured as the videos I usually make. Kind of one of my older videos where I just ramble about philosophy on a certain topic for a little bit because I've been thinking a lot about this and just wanted to put my thoughts together so I can reflect on them later. The question of today's video is: do you exist? Do I exist? And what is the self? What part of this is the me that continues to exist? And if you want to just skip to the end of the video, the conclusion, I'll say my position is that there is no objective self that exists. That's my take. If you want, if there's anyone watching this, pause the video now and see what intuition comes to mind when I ask you if you exist and what part of you is the most fundamental part of you that makes you exist. See what intuition comes to mind and then watch the rest of this video. Okay, now that you've had a second to think, I will make my case for why we do not exist. The first thought experiment I'll use to illustrate this is the maximum amputation thought experiment, which is how much of you can I remove before you stop existing, before you are no longer there. So if I were to like shave your head, you probably would feel like you still exist. Other people would still say you exist. If I were to take off one of your toes, you'd still feel like you exist. Other people would still say you exist. You'd still exist. What if I started taking off all your limbs and your torso and everything up to your neck? You would probably still feel like you exist so long as you had a conscious brain and you had your memories and you had your personality traits and you had senses. You'd still feel like you existed. So then it's like, well, okay, well, maybe it's just the brain that is me. I am my brain. That is a part of me that exists. It's not actually my body. It's just my brain. And the problem is with that is we can remove different parts of the brain and you can still exist. We have, in World War II, a lot of people got shot but survived, so they were missing parts of their brain. Like they were just missing their prefrontal cortex. And you can see how that will change someone. You know, for example, they would be less able to control their impulses and have less of a filter, but they still exist. They haven't stopped existing and just become a completely different thing. They're still existing. And we can do that with most of the parts of the brain. We can take away someone's amygdala and they can still survive. We can take away all the different parts of the brain and someone will still survive, and we would still say they exist. The question is, what part do we have to remove for you to not exist anymore? And I think we arbitrarily draw a line when someone is so different we don't recognize them. I think that's kind of what is the place that we say you don't exist anymore, is when I just can't recognize any part of you that is the same as you were before. But importantly, that line is subjective. There's no objective thing that says you are so different you don't exist anymore. You're so different you're not the same person. We're just saying it's a kind of feeling, like you don't feel like the same person. The other like variation of that thought experiment is the maximal donor thought experiment, which is if I were to cut off my foot and replace it with a donor foot, and then cut off my arm and replace it with a donor arm from a different person, and cut off half my frontal lobe and replace it with a frontal lobe from another person, and same thing with every part of my brain, at what point have we replaced part of you that means you're just not there anymore? You are a new person. The person that was there, we took out and replaced with a new part. I don't think there is any one part of us that makes us us. I think it's the whole package. And once it has changed so much we can't recognize it, is when we kind of just say, yeah, that doesn't feel like the same thing anymore. And again, that point is subjective. There's no like definition of this is the thing that we can't change without changing you. Another thought experiment to this effect is the Ship of Theseus. If you're not familiar, the Ship of Theseus is there's a guy named Theseus. He was going on an odyssey, and in his big wooden ship, one of the planks started to rot. So they took that plank out and they replaced it with a new plank. And another plank started to rot, so they took that plank out and replaced it with a new plank. And the steering wheel went bad and they had to replace that. The sail started to rip, so they replaced the sail. The rudder started to break, etc. So that by the time they got to where they were going, every single part on the ship had been replaced with a new part. The question is that still the Ship of Theseus? And then someone comes along and takes all the old parts they threw away and reconstructs them back into a ship. And you say, okay, well, which one of these is the ship of Theseus? And you can try to come up with a definition of like the ship of Theseus is the one that he is on, or the ship of Theseus is the one that left the dock originally, or the ship of Theseus is, whatever it is. But again, all these definitions you're giving are just arbitrarily, some made up rule that can be broken if you slightly vary the thought experiment. Interestingly, this same thing can be said for us, because as your cells die and are replaced with new cells, the old cells, get flushed out of your body and they're no longer part of your body. And this happens in such a way that every 8 years, not a single one of the molecules that make you up is the same. So all the atoms in my body have been completely replaced with new atoms over the last 8 years. So that not a single atom in my body is the same now as it was when I was 10 years old or 5 years old or whatever. So literally none of the same stuff that was me when I was 6 is me now. Pretty interesting. So which one is really me? Did I not exist? Did I right now not exist 8 years ago? Or did I exist yesterday? It's also interesting. You could say like, well, the thing that has remained the same as all the material in your body has changed is your memories and your personality traits and the things that are unique to you. But those things change as well. Like my personality is not the same as it was when I was a kid. My personality is not the same as it was yesterday. Different environmental factors will influence how I behave every day. So am I like literally a different person before I have my coffee and after I have my coffee? Am I like literally I don't exist until I have my coffee and now I exist, and once the coffee's out of my system, I no longer exist because my personality has changed? That doesn't seem right either. And so the point I'm kind of driving at is called mereological nihilism, which is that things made of parts don't actually exist. The parts that make them up exist, but when you combine them, you haven't created a whole new object. For example, this clock behind me has a piece of glass, and it has some hands, and it has a circle that has numbers on it, has a base, and all those things are parts. And when I take those parts and I combine them to be like that, have I created a whole new object? Has a new object come into existence that is a clock, that is a different object from the hands and the glass and the rim? I don't think so. It seems like the parts exist and we're arbitrarily giving them a label once they have turned into this thing that fits our concept of a clock. Like the same thing is true for like a desk. Does this desk actually exist? It's like, it seems like it exists, but if I take the top off and I remove the drawers and I take the legs away, it's like, where does that object stop existing? Is it just like no longer a real thing in reality? And I can put it back together. Like, it seems like at what point have I assembled it enough that the object comes into existence? And the point I'm trying to make is that is also just completely subjective and arbitrary. The point where which we say now it exists and now it doesn't. And the conclusion of this is that we are also objects that are just made of parts. And when we act coherently enough, we give it a label. But if it changes so much, it's unrecognizable, that label goes away. And that's kind of the point where you exist and now you don't exist, is when you've changed too much to be recognizable. Like I am made up of arms and legs and body parts and certain neural structures and personality traits and consciousness. And when they're assembled in one way, we say this is Chris, and they're assembled in a different way, we say it's someone else. But I'll say it for the 10,000th time, that point where we define it as one thing or define it as another thing is subjective. There's no correct way to determine whether or not I am enough of myself to be me or I've changed too much to not be me. So the final syllogism form of my argument is premise 1, things made of parts don't actually exist. Only the fundamental matter that makes them up exist. Premise 2, we are made of parts. Conclusion, we do not objectively exist. So if anyone's watching this, I hope you enjoyed. And if you disagree, please leave a comment below why. Try to justify why you exist to me. I would enjoy that very much. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye.